it's worth reflecting on who came before us, what their journey was, and knowing about these women that really were trailblazers.
Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, your go-to place for empowering behind-the-scenes stories of trailblazing women who work in the sports and event industry. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake, and I'm honored to bring you this free resource where you'll hear firsthand accounts of how these incredible women got their seat at the table. And I will personally share strategies to help develop your leadership skills in this industry. We've got a lot to explore together. I am so glad you're here. All right, Game of Her Own listeners, let's do this. Aime Card, you are the editor and author of the Tigerbelles, Olympic Legends of Tennessee State. Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love what you do. I love the positivity of it and creating the space for women. I think it's just so impressive. So thanks for having me on.
Yes, of course. Okay, so speaking of a space for women, women in sports, I mean, we love to grow and connect with other women who are in the industry. So you just recently were a part of the Everything in Sports Women's Edition conference down in Miami. So it seems like a great place to meet people and connect with other women. I myself haven't been yet. I honestly just discovered it this year. I'm so happy to collaborate with them to share it with our audience. So just tell us what your experience was like.
So I actually had to just sail in at the end for the networking session because I had an event the night before, and so I had to fly down from Boston. But just the networking session was incredible, meeting all the people that were involved and just having them provide that space for everyone to talk about best practices within their fields, and everyone was just so charged up from how well the day went. And so it was really fun to get to be a part of it and get to meet the team, the Everything in Sport team. They're really doing some good work, and just having this platform is a really a benefit to the sports industry.
Talk about your role. What were you doing there?
So I am not your average sports industry executive, because what I do is I'm a writer, and I wrote a book about the Tigerbelles. They're a track team from Nashville that started in the 1950s, and I feel like it's one of those things where people in sports today deserve to know where they came from and who came before them. And so I'm just spreading this story to people in the sports industry so they can share with their teams. It could be motivational. I think that women don't realize that it was just people that are still alive today, their grandparents' generation. It wasn't so easy for women to participate in sports. They were actively discouraged from participating. And the Tigerbelles had a number of things working against them. They were an all Black team at an HBCU in Nashville. And so they were in the Jim Crow South. They had that working against them. And just being women in sports was not, some sports were more acceptable, like maybe tennis or swimming, but track was not something that women were supposed to participate in. They thought, it would get in the way of being able to have babies, and that's what women were for. And so I think it's worth reflecting on who came before us, what their journey was, and knowing about these women that really were trailblazers.
I can't wait to read the book. I was introduced to you and I was like, oh my God, I don't have time to read this book. I really wish I could read it before the interview, but I can do it after. And what an interesting topic. Like, why this book? What made you, like, what spoke to you and said, I have to write this. I have to tell this story.
So I grew up in Nashville, and my grandfather was a track coach at the time of the Tigerbelles' kind of rise to success. And he became friends with Coach Temple over the years, who was the longtime coach of the Tigerbelles. And so I just grew up knowing about the story and knowing them as the epitome of athletic achievement. This was, to me, they were dominant in sports in my mind, male or female sports. And I was always really surprised when other people didn't know about them as I got older. And a lot of people will have heard of Wilma Rudolph. She was kind of the superstar on the team. But Wilma Rudolph would have been the first person to tell you that she would not have gotten to where she was without her team around her. And so to me, more famous than Wilma Rudolph even was the Tigerbelles. And it's so relevant to our lives and what we're going through today. I mean, the power of a team is ever present. And I think you have a lot of kind of individual success stories, but to show how a team works together and they create these great things and they lift each other up and they make each other better, I think is just really relevant. Plus, I just have feel strongly about history being forgotten and potentially rewritten, and it's so important to have these stories somehow saved in a way that will be preserved for the future instead of forgotten over time.
Yes, it's such an important story to tell. And taking that on, right? There's got to be some pressure behind that. So you make the decision to, I'm going to tell this story, and then don't let me put words in your mouth, but it's like, okay, I want to tell this story well. I want to make sure I get this right. Not only their history and their impact, but also make sure like your words are connect with people. I guess what kept you up, if anything, at night about this book?
Everything kept me up. It was a very intimidating process. You're absolutely right. I went through many times where I thought, who am I? And I don't have the answer. It's just that nobody else was doing it and I didn't want it not to be done. And so it was a tough kind of legacy to try to do justice to. And because I admire them so much and what they do. And the more that I learn about them, the more my admiration just grow. But that also helped to feed the importance of the story, because on every level, every new discovery that I made, it made their story more important, and just it had to be done. It had to be shared. And who I was in it was kind of irrelevant. The main thing was just getting their story out. And so that's when I finally hit on the oral history format, where it reads kind of like a documentary, because the most important thing is them telling their story. It's really quote heavy. It's just pretty much I weave their quotes together into a chronological narrative. That was important for me because they are amazing storytellers. They bring out the fun, they bring out the pain, they bring out, all of the challenges and heartbreak and everything that they faced along their journey. And I just kind of wanted to get myself out of the way and put their story forward. And so I finally, when I hit on that oral history format, I felt good about that, about the
Yeah.
way that it was going to come across.
Yeah, I love that concept of I'm writing this book, but me like I'm irrelevant. It's all about them. I find that like when I get caught up in all the things, and all the mindset games, I'm just like, wait, this has to do with my clients, not me. Like I'm trying to help people and just stop, take yourself out of it. And how do you want to help them? How do you want to inspire them? So it sounds like you kind of went through that. We went through similar process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's when you feel like you're really doing something, is when it's about the service, just getting yourself out of the equation.
Yeah.
The job is what's important. Yeah, what's happening here.
Yeah. It helps take out some of the emotion too.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's okay to be emotional. I always tell my clients, like, it's okay. Like, be you, like, if that is you, I am very emotional, very sensitive. So that is me. But sometimes you need to like take it and push it to the side so you can get your work done. So doing that allows you to just focus on what matters.
Yeah, with writing, I mean, I do tend to be pretty self-critical, which is actually a really good part of writing, that editing part, and to never falling in love so much with one thing that I can't change it if it needs to be changed later. That's a balance of making sure you're not so self-critical that you can't move forward. And so
Mhm.
finding that it's everybody's journey, I think, is finding that perfect place to be, because you don't want to charge for it so much that you're not thoughtful about what you're doing and where
Yeah.
you're going.
Is this your first book?
No, actually, I wrote another book, memoir about my experience with breast cancer while I was raising young children. And
Mm.
that was a totally different process. That was not the first thing I wanted to write, but that was something that happened to me. And I was just my nature, writing to process. And it just kind of rolled into something that I felt like could be useful to other people that were going through that journey, or if they were going through that journey and they didn't want to talk about it, but they could share this with their friend and say, it's something like this. I don't want to tell you about it. It's something like this.
Yeah. 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 Okay, so this is your second. The first one you wish you didn't, if I'm hearing that correctly, you wish you didn't have to write, but
Yeah.
it was your way of processing and getting that
Right.
out. So when you're writing the second book, thinking about all the choices that people have when it comes to like there's so many books and there's so many books about sports. Like, did that also ever intimidate you? Like, oh, it's just one more story. No one's gonna listen. Like, was that a limiting belief? I guess what I'm trying to ask of yours.
I thought this one was different. I felt strongly that the story needed to be told. I thought that I hadn't seen something like this before, which is why I felt, I wanted to do it. I felt like it needed to be done because it was a team moving forward. I mean, there are other stories about teams, but it's so much more often that you see the individual success, the kind of triumph over adversity as an individual, and for a whole team to go through this process. I felt like it was new, and I do feel like that there just aren't enough stories about women in sports, even though they do exist. There are a lot of them. There's not enough. It's not equal to the men's inspirational sports stories, and so there's just more place. I didn't feel like a limiting belief because there were too many out there, because I think there are more. I mean, books aren't something that you can only have one of, because if you read a lot and you're always reading something. And so books aren't something where if somebody oh, somebody already did that, so I can't. Because if you read that one thing that somebody did, you're going to want another one. And so there's always room for more with books. And I do feel like there's a lot more room for women's sports stories. I mean, I grew up with the inspirational sports story being one of my favorite genres to read. I mean, the natural, you remember the movie with Robert Redford? I don't know,
Mhm.
I'm dating myself, but I remember that being a really important movie. And then, there's Field of Dreams.
Mhm.
There's so many inspirational sports stories about men. They're wonderful. They're great stories. We need ours too. There's
Mhm.
A League of Their Own, which was a fantastic movie, but almost a little comedic in the way that
Mhm.
they portrayed the athletes. And so this is just one. It deserved to have its place in the world. It's inspirational on every level. It wouldn't come in secondary to any of the men's sports stories that are out there.
Yes. Yeah. I love that way of looking at it. And because it is so easy to get caught up sometimes. A lot of us think, well, someone's already doing that, or there's so many of it, right? And just beyond the world of books and publishing and stuff, just anything like just putting your thoughts out there and your thought leadership and I always tell everybody you have your own unique perspective and you're going to bring something different to the table. So it's so, I think, refreshing to hear that no, that wasn't a limiting belief of mine. This story needed to be told. And that sounded like it sounds like that was your motivation to keep going and what inspired you every day when you were writing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a friend of mine who writes really great sports stories, and he tends to uncover the historical stories, and he knows about the Tigerbelles because he lives in Nashville, and he was doing some research on them before, and I was pitching it to him like when I was first digging into it, because I knew he would do an amazing job. And he's like, yeah, maybe in the future, but it's not gonna happen. It's not something I'm working on. I have these like few other projects. And he was like, Amy, it's yours. And I was like, it was just kind of funny to have somebody like, but I think
Yeah.
it was because it's like one of those things that kind of, you feel like this is something that needs to be done. And why is nobody else doing it? And a lot of times it's because it's your turn. You're supposed to be doing that. And as much as I wanted to push it off on on somebody I thought could do it better, I'm still not convinced that I was the best person to do this or the right person to do it, but I was the only person to do it. And I was not willing to let their story remain untold for any longer. And so that was the thing that, you're right, that kind of kept me going forward.
Yeah. I'm so glad you did. I'm sure others are feeling the same. Hey, Game of Thrones listeners, Jahaan popping in here. Do you ever feel overlooked at work or perhaps unsure how to advocate for yourself? You are not alone. And it's exactly why I've created a free training called Empower Your Career, Mastering the Art of Self-Advocacy for Promotion and Raises. In this training, I will teach you tactics like how to have meaningful interactions with your leadership team, how to increase your confidence, and there's so much more. You'll walk away with the tools to confidently seize control of your career growth. So, what do you think? Are you ready to stop being overlooked and start being noticed? If you are, the link to sign up is in the show notes. Let's elevate your career together. All right, let's get back to the episode. Okay, so you pitched it to someone else. They were like, no, it's you. Like, you got to do this. So you did it. You wrote this book. And I have never written a book. I don't know if any of my listeners have ever tried or have written a book, but I imagine there's a lot of self-promotion of this book and sort of like advocating for yourself, right? And sometimes people think that advocating for yourself feels like bragging and feels uncomfortable and they don't want to do it. So what was your experience like?
Yeah, there are a lot of kind of limiting factors where you may feel like you may not have the exact qualifications that you need. And yeah, you have to put yourself forward in a lot of vulnerable places, talking to agents and networking events to try to meet the people that you're going to need on your team. And I don't know, I try not to think about it too hard. And I find that I do my best when I just, okay, let's just do this. It's kind of like jumping into the pool. You don't like wade your way in, you're just going to jump in, or the cold water in the ocean. You just have to kind of jump in. We're going to do this. We're not going to think about it too much. And then it goes back to the thing of getting yourself out of your own way, just not overanalyzing too much, just diving in. That's the only way I've felt like I've been able to move forward pretty successfully, especially after the fact. It was pretty funny when you have to go through all of this to get the book published, and then I thought, okay, job done. I did this. The book is in the it's at the publisher. I've done my work, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me that I have to do a lot of promotion for the book and a lot of talking about the book. I have to talk about the book. And I thought, well, that's not my favorite thing to do because I'm a writer. I
Mhm.
like to write about things. And then all of a sudden I had to, so that was another kind of terrifying process that I had to work my way through. And my friend said, you're going to be nervous in the first two events and then you'll be fine. And it's true. You just kind of, there are always a little bit of nerves beforehand when you're going to talk about something, but I have to keep thinking, I know this topic. I've spent years and years researching the Tigerbelles. I know the subject, and I just have to answer your questions and figure out the best way to have their story shine forward. And I still get, little critiques. I was talking with a Sports Illustrated journalist. She's amazing. She's got her name is Melissa Ludke. She's not with Sports Illustrated anymore, but she was actually the woman who sued Major League Baseball for women's access into the locker room to be able to report equally. And so I did an event with her, and she was interviewing me for the Tigerbelles book, and she said, you keep stepping on your gems. You're not getting the, she goes, she was like reading little parts of the book, and I said, well, I mean, I really wrote that well, but it's not coming out in the same way when I'm talking about it. She's like, quit stepping on your gems. Like, so, but it's, I feel comfortable when I've got some time to think and write it all down in just the right way, and I can double check my facts before when I'm talking. I always think
Mhm.
my worst fear is somebody quizzing me on some fact that I've long since forgotten because I put it in the book, and then I probably had to look it up before I put it in the book. And then when she'll ask me something, well, you
Yeah.
wrote it. Don't you
Yeah.
remember?
Right. And that makes so much sense because we're just afraid someone's going to be like, wait, you don't really know what you're doing. I'm going to ask you 50 questions. And if you can't answer all of them and you wrote it in your book, then you must have not written it. Like, it's so easy to
Yeah,
go down this like rabbit hole of fear. And
yeah, yeah.
if you let it, it can consume you. How did you keep yourself from, because you had those fears, but how did you let like pull yourself back out and not let yourself like live there and set up camp?
I think once I had a couple of successes under my belt, once I had a couple of good conversations and I kind of knew how it was going to go, that gave me a comfort level. But really, what I try to do is just be fully prepared. And when I'm prepared, I'm more confident. And so, I know the venue, I know exactly who I'm talking to and what they like to talk about, what their background is a little bit. So I'll know the perspective that it's coming from. And really, I feel comfortable in the subject matter that I'm talking about. And then I also try to remember that when somebody is talking to me, they really are just trying to put on a good show too, you know? And I think it translates to other things besides just having conversations like this, being in podcasts or things like this. People want you to do a good job. They really do for the most part. The people that you're working for, they want you to succeed because they hired you. They want you to do a good job at what you're doing. And so they're there to support you. It's really rare for somebody to actually want to tear you down. If that's the case, then you need to know who that person is and how to protect yourself from them. But mainly people really do want you to do better. And that when I kind of remind myself, this is not an adversarial conversation. We're trying to support each other. We're trying to have a great outcome here. I mean, that I guess it's not always the case at work. It's not always the case. I mean, you have to have difficult conversations sometimes, but even, talking about things that are a little uncomfortable, there are aspects of this book that are uncomfortable. There are aspects of lots of things that I do in my other jobs with my other hats on that are uncomfortable. But as long as you're really trying to get the ultimate best outcome out of it, then you kind of just have to trust the process. You're not trying to cause any harm. You're just trying to, advocate for yourself or the best outcome. And that's all you can do.
Yeah, I feel like I just went to church for a minute. Like that was, yes. Everything you just said, yes, that totally makes sense. You're an author of two books, like you're a mother of two children, two fur babies, married, like sometimes it's easy to see, everyone always calls it everyone's highlight reel, and see that they're doing well and think, well, they just, everything's going well and they haven't failed or they haven't felt low and where they weren't going to make it. So have you had a favorite failure or a failure that you're proud of overcoming?
The topic of my first book, having breast cancer when I had young children to raise, kind of brings up you don't consider necessarily having cancer a failure, but in some way, when I was healing from that journey, I realized I had without, it was a little bit subconscious, but I felt like my body had failed me in a way that I was 40 years old in my prime, physical prime, pretty much at 40. I considered that to be, and something had gone wrong. I had failed myself. And you take on the blame of, was it something I did? Was it something I ate? Did I have too many glasses of wine? There were all things that I may have contributed, and look at the cost on my family, look at the cost to myself. And then I realized that I just had to step through that and find the forgiveness and to learn to trust myself again, to learn to trust my body, that it's strong, it can get through this. It got through all of the healing process, which was everything. When you're 40 years old and you have cancer, they throw the book at you, they throw all the treatment options. And so to realize that getting through that proves that I was actually strong, and my body could handle things. But yeah, that taught me a lot. And even though it doesn't seem like failure in the traditional sense at the time, for me it derailed my whole life. And getting back on track after that was really, it was tough. And it was, I think, my greatest achievement to be able to get myself back on track, and at a time when I wasn't sure it was going to happen.
Man, thank you for sharing that with us. What a beautiful story. I hear you when you say the blame yourself, and I feel like this can apply to any failure that people are having. It doesn't have to be career related, but that blaming yourself and just feeling like, well, like would say it's over, but like you just feel defeated, I think is a better way to say it. And like you said, blaming your like, oh, my body has literally failed me. Like and just feeling the pain that surrounds that and then stepping through it, as you said, right? And then like trusting yourself again. Like that right there, I just got the chills. That like that is a huge thing I think that we all can focus on when we do face some sort of adversity.
I'd imagine any kind of mistake or failure, even if it was something that was out of your hands, and often failures are things that are out of your own control. But being able to move past it and not let it limit you going forward, I think is probably it's got to be the hardest part of it. But
Mm.
that's where the growth happens. I mean, I'm definitely not the same person that I was before that, and I like myself a lot better. I mean,
Mm.
going through challenges, it really makes you stronger. It made me so much more empathetic to other people going through challenges, tough times. And it's one of those things where you never know when somebody's acting out what they're going through. So it just gives you a lot more kind of compassion and understanding about from anybody else. You may think they've got their lives all together, but you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. And, they may be being a jerk one day, but something really horrible maybe happened to them before, just before you interacted with them. And so it definitely going through that made me move through the world in a different way. And I try to sometimes I find myself kind of falling back into old patterns and I remember, oh, you're not a jerk like this anymore. Quit being so self-centered because you know you learn this. Don't go back to the old way of where it's just like charge forward, do accomplish. It's being thoughtful about where you are and where other people are in this world. When you're really kind of at the bottom, you learn so much about yourself and something to hold on to as you move forward. I do think that people, friends, people I have in my life, when they've gone through rough times too, it just makes them more interesting as humans. I mean, you're able to have deeper conversations with people once they understand you can't really appreciate an accomplishment before you've had to struggle with it. If it was easy, it doesn't matter as much. And life is like that. I mean, you don't learn anything if everything is handed to you. I think that's probably the best thing that you learn from going through challenges like that.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. I could not, very well said. I could not agree more. So tell me this, as we wrap up, is there anything I want everyone to really know about this book? I'm going to link to it in the show notes, talk about it in all the posts, but is there anything, maybe I haven't asked you the right question, that you want to share about your book?
So it's a sports story, but one of my favorite blurbs on the back is that this is not just a sports story because it really isn't just a sports story. It's about triumph over adversity, and it's something that everyone can relate to. But the thing that I really love about this book the most is the power of a team. So the Tigerbelles had this motto where they didn't graduate if they were at the top of the team. They couldn't graduate winning. They had to bring the next generation up, not just to their level, but to beat them. They had to teach them everything they know so that the next generation would be able to take their own talents, incorporate it, and the legacy from the generation before, and they'd be better. And I just loved that aspect of, and they took it into their lives. It wasn't just about the track team, it was about their lives. So they graduated and they went into their communities and they taught young women. And so it's the whole idea is making the people that come behind, you're the platform for them to become even better. And I just love that the thought of that. If we all do that for the generation that comes behind, then it's always going to be better. Then progress is going to be made. And I think that that's the ultimate story of the Tigerbelles and the gift that they have that gives to everyone. And so, yeah, it's an inspirational sports story. There's a lot in there about women in sports and achievement, but it's really more than that. It's about lifting people up and the power of a team and how hard and when you believe in someone, what they can accomplish is usually more than they even thought themselves. That's the power of the Tigerbelles that I hope people come away with.
Yes, it sounds like a fantastic book. I cannot wait to dive in. All right. Are you ready for our final 5 questions?
Okay.
First thing that comes to your mind, what's a goal that you've achieved that initially you weren't sure you could reach?
That's easy. It's publishing the book. I was just not sure that was going to happen. And it's so hard. There's so many hoops to go through, and there's so many amazing writers that are still working at it. And so that's an easy one for me. Publishing the book.
Yes. All right. What's your go-to pump up song?
So it's really for this project, but James Brown has a song called I Don't Want Nobody to Give Me Nothing. And it's just, James Brown is amazing. I mean, he's just so fun to dance to. You can't listen to his music without getting out of your chair. And the thing is, just open up the door. And it was one of Coach Temple, who's the coach of the Tigerbelles, one of his favorite songs. And so I have it in like a little interview. I hear it all the time, and I cannot listen to that song without just dancing.
Yeah.
You have to dance to James Brown when you hear him.
Yes, you do. All right. What's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
Dinner with friends or my husband, a glass of wine and a good conversation. If I can't do that before I go to sleep every night, I have to read. And it's usually something totally different from what I'm working on. Like right now, I'm deep into a fantasy series that my daughter recommended, and it's amazing. It's really good. It's got me reading like deep into the night. But yeah, I like it because it's just totally different from what I may be thinking about all during the day, and it's all like quests and dragons and kingdoms and
Okay,
all the
you
good
have to
stuff.
share. You have to share.
Oh, Sarah J. Maas. I mean, it's no big surprise. It's pretty high on the fantasy list right now, but the Court of Thorns and Roses, yeah,
Mhm.
it's great.
Okay.
If you like fantasy at all, you just plow through it. It's good.
Okay. All right. We're linking that in the show notes as well. Okay. What's one thing that always makes you laugh out loud?
Oh, my dog. Always my dog. Every single day, my dog makes me laugh. She's a spaniel, and she's got a really quirky personality, and just, I don't know, just a lot of fun. Dogs just kind of make my life better. I can't
Yes.
imagine living without fur babies.
Right there with you. Okay, last one. Name one woman in sports who inspires you and tell us why.
If it's allowed to be an historical figure, then it has to be May Fags, because she was the first kind of superstar Tigerbelle, and people haven't heard of her, and she's just incredible. She was kind of the start of the team and started the whole ethos. If it's current, I would say Serena Williams, because in the same way, she's just a trailblazer, and she's a powerful figure in her athletics, but also for women around her. She's changing the game in sports for women. She's
Mhm.
so and that's to me, yeah, everything, to put all your strength into something, not just for yourself, but for it's going to benefit everybody coming after you.
Yes, Amy, this conversation has been so fun. So glad that we were connected through everything in sport. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how can they go about doing that?
Well, everything's on my website, aimecard.com. It's AIMECARD.com. But I'm on all the socials under my name. Aime Card Author is Instagram, and got a Substack, but all the places.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me and for creating this platform. It's wonderful.
Ladies, now it's your turn. I want you to take action on what you heard today. Amy's journey is so inspiring. She took a leap. She took the leap and she chose to champion her book with passion. She put those doubts and limiting beliefs on the back burner because she knew the story of the Tigerbelles wasn't just a story. It was a legacy that needed to be shared. That so subtle shift in mindset, it was her superpower. It allowed her to share her victories far and wide and spread the word and the story of the Tigerbelles. Now, let me ask you, do you ever find yourself hesitating to stand in your power? And you know what I mean when I say that. Does advocating for yourself feel like you're bragging? Here's the hard truth. If you don't step up for yourself, no one else will. If you do not advocate for yourself, no one else will. So I challenge you today. What's one small mindset shift you can make to begin advocating for yourself with confidence? Think about the value you bring. Your work, does it drive revenue? Does it touch lives? Does it weave positive change into your community? Whatever your unique contribution, it's essential. And guess what? The organization, the community, hell, the world, they need more of whatever you have to offer. View self-advocacy as your way of showing how you can elevate the organization. It's not about you personally, it's about the impact that you can make. By advocating for yourself, you are essentially advocating for how you can contribute to the greater good. So need some tools to get started? I have got you covered with a completely free training designed to empower you in advocating for yourself. So head to the show notes and you can sign up to receive my free training. As always, thank you for sharing your time with me. Your presence, it really is a gift. I want to ask you one favor. Will you share this episode with another incredible woman in your life? Together, we're on a mission to remind every woman of her worth and her right to take up space at the table. All right, my friends, until next week. In the meantime, go out and continue to take some action.